What's up, everybody? My name is Mike Osterman, and today we're learning M-80s. Now, the M-80 or M-80 kickflip is a freestyle trick that involves doing a freestyle kickflip, landing on the front two wheels, doing a 180-degree revert or pivot. That revert is what makes the Kickflip M-80 a Kickflip M-80, and really you can do an M-80 with a bunch of different things, but we'll get into that later. Now, before you go out and learn the Kickflip M-80, I would suggest being very comfortable with freestyle kickflips. It also helps if you're comfy with monster walks and endovers. You can find trick tips for the freestyle kickflip and the monster walk in the description to this video. I would learn that right now if you haven't already learned both of those tricks. They will help you big time. Now, when I'm doing the freestyle kickflip M-80, I like to start with my feet in the center-ish of the board, or maybe like a little bit kind of farther back towards the back bolts. I'll hang my back foot off the board so I can hook it under for the kickflip. As I flip, I try to keep my shoulders square, facing the direction that I'm rolling. Once the board's finished flipping, I like to land with my front foot or my leading foot first so that I can land on my front wheels and quickly pivot 180 degrees. Seems simple, right? Yeah, let's break it down. Like I mentioned, it's super important that you're comfortable with freestyle kickflips before you start learning the M-80. I see a lot of people learn the freestyle kickflip and just try to dive into the M-80, and it's tough. If you aren't extremely comfortable landing back on all four wheels, doing the freestyle kickflip stationary, rolling with a lot of speed, with very little speed, if you don't have a good feel of where your feet need to be when you flip and when you land, it's going to be extremely difficult to just dive into the M-80 kickflip. So when learning the M-80 part of this trick, you want to start with your feet in the center of the board and practice just landing the freestyle kickflip with one foot on the nose. Notice that when I brought my foot down, I wasn't pinning the nose down, I wasn't trying to land in a fakey wheelie, I was just landing with one foot kind of over the bolts-ish and with my front foot on the nose. Next, you can practice jumping on the board and pivoting. So notice that when I do this jump on, this caveman-y trick, I'm behind the board, like on the tail side of the board, and I'm also on the right side of the board. And now I'm regular footed, so when I do my flip, I land fakie, and then I pivot. So all I'm doing here is jumping and attempting to land with my leading foot on the tail or nose or whichever side of the board you have facing forward, lifting the back wheels off the ground and turning 180. And now it's super important that you can do all of that in one smooth motion. I'm not doing this. I'm not jumping on the board, planting both feet, and then turning. I'm landing with my weight over my front wheels so that I can do the pivot right away. And that is how it's gonna feel when you're doing the M-80. Now, when you're practicing this part, it helps if you start close to the board, right next to the board. And over time, you can start stepping farther and farther away. So maybe next time you do it from here. Now, assuming you can do the kickflip and land with your foot on the nose, and assuming that you can do this jump and pivot, and assuming that you can do both of them in your sleep, the next step is to land your freestyle kickflips without turning your shoulders. Now, when I learn my freestyle kickflips and when I teach people to do them, I usually teach them to flip with their back foot and to land fakie. And one thing that helps a ton when doing the trick is to swing your shoulders into the flip. However, when you learn the Kickflip M-80, you have to unlearn that. Ugh. That's even hard for me just because it's so locked into the way I do the trick. But in order to pivot out of the M-80 portion of the Kickflip M-80, you're gonna need to start swinging your shoulders. And it's really hard to start swinging your shoulders after you've stomped down like this. It's a lot easier if your shoulders never turn with you in the first place. So before you start diving into the full trick, spend some time doing your freestyle kickflips without turning your shoulders. Once you've practiced those parts, you can put it all together and hopefully just totally crush it. Just knock it out of the park. Do M80s all day. Woo! But, you know, if you're still having trouble with this trick, there's a few things you might be doing that are holding you back. Or maybe there's some things that you're not thinking about. And here they are. Number one is jumping a ton in the direction that the board's flipping. Notice I started like here and I ended here. I jump to the side a lot when I'm doing the freestyle kickflip. I sort of launch myself to the left. With the Freestyle Kickflip M-80, I'm just gonna call them M-80s. I jump even more to the side. And that doesn't just help me stay over the board, but if I overshoot the board a little bit, if I'm kind of jumping with more momentum, moving to the left, I think it helps me get the board rotating and spinning into the M-80 section of the Kickflip M-80. It helps me start that rotation because I have more momentum to work with. Now, if you're going super fast, it might not be necessary, but if you're not, if you're just tic-tacking into the trick, you might need that extra momentum. Next up is your eyes. What are you thinking about? What are you looking at? Where are you focused when you're doing this trick? I myself, thanks for asking, like to focus on the skid plate hardware. It's like the two binding bolts that are on my nose. When I'm setting up for the Freestyle Kickflip M-80, such a long name, I stare at those binding bolts. And what I'm thinking about is flipping the board and getting that leading foot onto the bolts, like slamming that foot down onto the bolts once the board's finished flipping. What you're focused on matters, and for me, kind of staring at those front two binding bolts helps me direct my focus at the nose and at where I need my foot to land. Like I mentioned earlier, whether we're talking about M-80s, where you're just pivoting off the nose, or kickflip M-80s, there are so many variations of both. Whoa! Does that count? So, hope these tips help. Go out, try the Kickflip M-80, try some other M-80 variations. Be sure to join the Waltz Discord where you can share your progress with other freestylers, maybe get some tips if you're still struggling with this trick, which is totally okay. I didn't learn this trick right away. It took me probably like a year to understand the kickflip enough to be able to do the M-80. But I've been stoked to see everybody's progress lately. Keep it up, and we'll see you next week for another trick tip. Also, keep dancing. Oh man, it is hot. Whoa.